Well, good evening and welcome to Queer News Tonight. This is the world's first and only LGBTQ plus daily evening television news. We're broadcasting live and then we're available on demand. And we're available on all smart televisions, including Roku, Apple Television, Android TV, Amazon Fire TV, YouTube, and Facebook. It's time to queer up the news. It's Wednesday, April 5th, 2023. We are live and literally out of the closet and into the headlines. So many of your important stories we're going to tell this evening on Queer News Tonight.
This is the world's first live daily LGBTQ evening news show, literally out of the closet and into the headlines on Queer News Tonight with Al Ferguson.
Well, I'm your anchor at Queer News Tonight, Al Ferguson, and this evening we bring you the news of and a perspective representing the LGBTQ plus community from South Florida, America, and across our planet.
This is the world's first and only unedited live LGBTQ plus evening news show. Whatever happens unique in LGBTQ plus news, you will see it and hear it.
Hotspots Magazine, Happening Out Television Network, is a nonprofit 501c3 media company in the same models of PBS and NPR, but designed for the LGBTQ plus community. Our mission is to support the 10 pillars of our LGBTQ plus community. We want to inform and educate the key issues of our Black community, Latino, lesbian and queer women, trans, students, youths, seniors, HIV/AIDS healthcare, business, political advocacy, and faith. Help us support our community.
We are part of one of the largest LGBTQ plus media companies in America, Hotspots Magazine and Happening Out Television Network.
Our magazine is celebrating 38 years of the LGBTQ plus experience, and our television news, talk, and entertainment shows support our mission to educate the LGBTQ plus and broader community.
Well, let's welcome anchor Fay What. She's a radio and television personality and has a popular blog and YouTube channel aiming to unite the L and the G together. She's a hostess and MC for many South Florida events, an animal advocate, and owner of Fay's Fur Family. Also, make sure you catch the Fay What Show, the first LGBTQ plus morning show, Mondays at 9 a.m. Eastern online or on your smart television. And Fay was the winner of the 2022 SFGN Best Local Television Personality. Welcome, Fay.
Welcome. So happy to be here with all you boys. I'm still a little stressed, all right? There's way too much traffic here in South Florida. Ultra is over. Spring break is over. Go home.
Go home.
All right, that's all. Back to normal scheduled programming. Next up, let's welcome my brother from another mother. His name, John Hayden. He's a journalist for 28 years. He now works for several outlets, including South Florida Gay News, as a reporter and community editor, covering politics, entertainment, and local events directly impacting our community. John's interviewed everyone, from presidents to Oscar winners. He plans on going to Ramrod this Friday, meaning it's going to be a very good Friday. Welcome, John.
Oh, thank you so much. I don't think it'll take 3 days to rise either.
Did you go to hell for a
I think it's too late, Al. I think it's way too late.
Way too late.
Save me a seat. Let's welcome anchor Kal Gajraj. Kal is a first-generation Muslim American. He's an award-winning communications executive and diversity officer for government healthcare programs. Kal is also a professor at the Miami-Dade College School of Global Business and an advisory board member for the University of South Florida's College of Business. Welcome, Kal.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be back at the news desk.
Yeah.
It's been quite some time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Glad you're here.
Thanks. Let's welcome anchor TriniDaddy.
You can tell he hasn't been here in a while. He's there mugging, looking all cute, like, hey, look at my side. Thank you. Look at that. Yes, I'm hot. Hello, call me.
TriniDaddy is a concert musician, director, and artist in the South Florida area. He's currently a violinist and pianist with the Miami City Ballet and is the program director for the Seminole Theater Players at the historic Seminole Theater at Homestead. He is also one of the permanent hosts of It's Happening Out. Welcome, TriniDaddy.
I've been trying to change that since the beginning.
Hello, everybody. It's nice to be here with you wonderful people to get into all of this. And we are the reporters for Queer News Tonight. And this evening, we begin with the queer headlines. The LGBTQ plus community in South Florida and across America is diverse. Our community across the world is vast, and here are the bullet points of the queer news for today, Wednesday, April 5th, 2023.
Well, we're going to begin by breaking news, queering up breaking news. Did Governor Ron DeSantis and the Florida GOP supermajority end drag queens and gay pride celebrations with today's new law? Today, the Florida legislature is debating FS 827.11. It may be the most anti-LGBTQ plus legislation in American history, at least since the Stonewall riots in 1969. The language of the law will define live performance to a standard that virtually would make drag queen performance impossible in Florida in its current format. This is a very complicated story, and we encourage you to follow closely as the law is designed on a very legal basis to ban drag queens, force gay pride organizations to ban drag or cancel their events, and will affect every bar, restaurant, hotel, and event in Florida that hosts an event with a drag queen, whether children or alcohol are present or not.
827.11 defines, quote, adult live performance means any show, exhibition, or other presentation in front of a live audience which, in whole or in part, depicts or simulates nudity, sexual conduct, sexual excitement, or specific sexual activities as those terms are defined in existing law, lewd conduct, or the lewd exposure of prosthetic or imitation genitals or breasts.
The definition of this live performance continues to define predominantly appeals to a prurient, shameful or morbid interest, is patently offensive to prevailing standards in the adult community of this state, end quote. This incredibly vague standard is hinged on a Supreme Court decision defining prurient. We will explain that definition in a moment, but this is a key component that will set this statute, if passed, to survive state and even a federal constitutional challenge.
Today's 827.11 continues, quote, by saying, as a whole, with respect to what is suitable material or conduct for the age of the child present and taken as a whole is without serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value for the age of the child present, end quote. This definition in the law will allow any enforcement interpretation to remove the legal defense of artistic or other value and will use the Supreme Court decision defining prurient standard as that may overcome even a constitutional First Amendment defense.
827.11 has virtual certainty of passing because of the GOP supermajority in the Florida legislature and the desires of Governor Ron DeSantis. Critics bring attention to how insidious the law's introduction is today. Prurient is a 1984 Supreme Court case, Brockett versus Spokane decision. The ruling decided that the term prurient was not overbroad in interpretation and is not constitutionally overbroad. The GOP framers of this law have specifically defined drag ban using the constitutionally protected term prurient directly in this legislation. It was likely designed to prevent legal court challenges.
In the decision, prurient was defined as, quote, that which incites lasciviousness or lust, obscenity, lewd, obscene materials, and creates longing, end quote. This interpretation was supported by 1957's Roth versus United States and 1973's Miller versus California to further define state criminal statutes governing obscenity. One part of the test adopted by the court requires that in order to be found obscene, the materials in question must appeal to the prurient interest in sex. The Florida legislature will defend today's law as drag queens, with their breastplates, exotic makeup, wigs, and costumes, are an inherent sexual experience.
Worse, the Court of Appeals invoked the overbreadth doctrine to invalidate other state statutes before the state courts even had an opportunity to apply and construe that law. Using this prurient interest approach could interfere with the enactment as well as the enforcement of both federal and state obscenity legislation.
Finally, the court found that lewd is synonymous with obscene matter. And that means any matter which the average person, applying contemporary community standards, would find, when considered as a whole, appeals to the prurient interest and which explicitly depicts or describes patently offensive representations or depictions of ultimate sexual acts, normal or perverted, actual or simulated, or masturbation, fellatio, cunnilingus, bestiality, excretory functions, or lewd exhibition of the genitals or genital area, including artificial representation.
This is likely why the Hyatt Regency Miami case focused on the alleged simulated sexual acts by drag queens and justified today's legislation. On this matter, the court ruled, quote, and which, when considered as a whole and in the context in which it is used, lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value, end quote. So the legislation introduced and debated today sets up a Supreme Court standard and redefines it against drag queens.
Today's legislation is designed to balance and prevent legal constitutional challenges, even from the First Amendment. The court cites New York versus Ferber in 1982 as the traditional rule is that, quote, a person to whom a statute may constitutionally be applied may not challenge that statute on the ground that it may conceivably be applied unconstitutionally to others in situations not before the court, end quote. The First Amendment overbreadth doctrine, therefore, is a limited exception to this rule. It permits a party whose actions are not immune from punishment under a properly drafted law to challenge the constitutionality of the law of a, quote, sweeping statute or one incapable of limitation, end quote. In other words, prurient interest may be a court dog whistle for this ban to survive legal challenges. Today is a dramatic moment in Florida.
That's a lot to digest, Al.
It is very...
And it's scary.
Complicated from the standpoint of making sure that we try to walk through what the legislature is doing. This amendment that takes place and goes to the floor at about 1:30 this afternoon has virtually no chance of not passing. They have a supermajority that can do whatever they want. There's no stopping it if they decide we're going to pass this. All of the dog whistles of the way this amendment is written is to make it constitutional, to fight off challenge, to get a Supreme Court to say First Amendment rights in terms of free speech do not trump this local community standard of the citizens of the state of Florida, and to win this battle. The prurient standard is specifically quoted in the statute, which is the dog whistle of the Supreme Court's decision to define obscenity. And so as a result, what happens here is, unlike the challenges that we've seen so far, our house, Broward Center, Hyatt Miami, Orlando, etc., this, if passed, would essentially prevent the possibility of being in drag, because breastplates are innately designed to be sexual in nature. And as a result, would be a violation of this law. And they preempt the argument that it's an art form. We've talked about this repeatedly. I've said over and over again, it can't survive a Supreme Court speech challenge until they do this.
So, Al, so then what happens to Miami Beach Pride, Stonewall, gay prom that's coming up? All these things include drag queens.
They're dividing and conquering and winning by their dividing and conquering our community. Tampa Pride gave us the first clue of this over the weekend when their president, Kerry West, said, I'm concerned if we're going to be able to do Pride again in Tampa. When he was blowing that dog whistle, it wasn't as clear to me of what he really meant. And now it's clear to me in this amendment that was launched today. Because what this law will do is make a Pride organization, a restaurant, like our house, a bar, like the Pub or Georgie's Alibi, or the Palace on South Beach, make the decision, I'm going to operate without drag queens, or I'm not going to operate. And as a result, if this passes, there's going to be a very liberal interpretation of enforcement of this law to say that you're in violation of this state law. And as a result, a Pride organization will have to decide, we are going to stand with drag, or we're going to cancel our Pride event.
Well, obviously, we have to stand with drag. You're right. They're trying to divide us. They're trying to conquer us. They're trying to get us to drop the T from LGBTQ. They're trying to say, well, okay, we can keep your gay sports bar, but you're going to have to close Lips, or you're going to have to close the pub. And then, of course, next they will come for Gym Bar or drink.
For the first time, I tell you today, I apologize for interrupting you. I have heard Scott Galvin at Safe Schools say repeatedly over the last 5 or 6 months, y'all, they're going to eventually come right into our bars. They're going to eventually come right after LGBT. Today is the first day where the lights go on for me that this is insidious.
Yeah.
Because the nature of how they've written this law is using a constitutional, already decided justification of prurient interest, connecting it to sexuality and the obscenity of sexuality in public, and saying it doesn't meet community interest, because this is what the community broadly thinks. It doesn't meet artistic or scientific value, so you can't fight the law or the legislation on those grounds, and the individual state courts can't reinterpret what we've done on this using settled law that'll be challenged, but settled law. And finally, it is not a First Amendment constitutional fight.
Well, here's the thing. We are at the point now where dressing in drag is political speech. That's what it is. That's the defense we can make. We could all get up in our finest frocks and go to Tallahassee and march, be arrested, and we should be able to make a case, hopefully, that this is political. The Stonewall riots were political. And quite frankly, we're at the place where we could be risking a riot again. Because if the city, and I'm just putting it out there, if the city of Fort Lauderdale decides we're not going to issue the permit because we don't want to have the fight with the governor, then we should put a call out that every single gay, lesbian, bisexual, trans, everyone, queer, come out in drag, march, and take over the street the third weekend of June. Now, obviously, it wouldn't affect this year. This is a fight that we'll have next Pride season. But
so it doesn't affect this Pride season.
It would likely not go into effect until July 1st.
Yeah, it wouldn't go into effect until.
Well, this doesn't just affect, the law is not written so that it's just drag or the queer community. Anything, I mean, Miami, Fort Lauderdale is a hot spot for all these Latino artists to come in to do shows. There's cabaret venues. So my only hope, I think, legally, which I didn't have time to research this, was the unequal enforcement, which is, I'm sure that they're going to be issuing these stays or injunctions towards drag bars. But if they're not doing it towards all the other Miami nightlife, then there is a case to be had with that.
And it does go beyond, the gay scene and gay bars and restaurants, because, you have Faena in Miami Beach that has a cabaret theater. There's tons of cabaret theaters in South Florida. And Faye and I went to go see the cabaret show there, and we were probably the only queer people in the audience. Yep. It was full of very wealthy, tourists and residents of Miami Beach that were there.
And all the performers were half naked.
Right. And it was more sexual than any drag show that I've ever been to. But even further than that, now it's part of the arts. And, I've been fortunate to sit on the National Endowment for the Arts for the state of Florida, and see grants that come across for Pride festivals and, things of that nature for years to come, and it's very shocking because not only for, beyond Prides, this affects Broadway. Mrs. Doubtfire is about to take off and do a national tour, from New York. Opera, there's a lot of different art forms that have drag in, part of their theater. So I'm very curious to see where this goes. And then also very shocked that politicians are making this, their, thing that they're going to be remembered for, is that their attack on drag queens.
That's so sad.
We've seen the outcome of this. We watch it in our television, and it's called Handmaid's Tale.
Oh, God.
Mm-hmm. That's what we're watching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In Florida. in 2023.
Well, I mean, and what do we want? Do we
Who
want
is
a
going
state
to run for president of the United States next?
Ron DeSantis. So are people going to go take the streets? Are we going to stop traffic? Are we going to do all this stuff? Because this is what I told my wife, and my wife responds, the Cuban, right? She's like, no one cares about us, Faye. No one is going to go out into the streets and protest. No one cares. And that hit me like a ton of bricks to hear that from my own wife. She truly believes that we don't care enough and we're not going to make anything of this.
The debate was this afternoon at 1:30. And we are doing 20 minutes as breaking news on this show. Are we going to do something about it? We absolutely are.
We have to.
Well, this is where the allies come in. You know, everyone who's had a bachelorette party at Lips or Palace, you know, all the tourists that have come here, this is the time we need everyone else to come out and support us now.
The definition today is insidious because think of it this way. They are tagging to the prurient interest standard of the Supreme Court and saying it becomes lewd and lascivious and sexual. And how are we going to thread the needle when your artistic and scientific value is preempted by the law because the community standard says this does not meet artistic and scientific value, to say that the drag queen who is in a breastplate at the minimum, wig, dress, makeup, etc., is not designed to titillate in some way. How do we make that argument? Because if we can't make that argument, they will be in violation of the law. And once that is established, drag is over.
Well, the thing is, everything is titillating. Someone is titillated by everything. I can put my thumb up here on my nose. Someone out there watching is going to go, oh, give me some more thumb action. Like, everything can be titillating. Sex is everything. Sex is life. Sex is death. Sex is fun. Sex is challenging.
The one relation, and I'm curious to your response to it, because one of the things that I and many of our anchors have continued to say is, wait, are you going to ban Hooters? Hooters would not be banned under this standard. First off, it's not artificial. Drag is artificial.
It doesn't need to be artificial under this ban.
Under the ban, the idea is that under community standard, you're violating the lewd and lascivious and sexual nature. Hooters will not be defined by the broad community as lewd and lascivious under this standard. Drag queens will be because of the breastplates and the makeup and the male gender, theoretically, or the trans identity of the drag queen. And a server at Hooters will not rise to this standard.
Well, then we need to write legislation that includes breast augmentation then.
Yeah, what if
that's artificial?
That's artificial.
Yeah, a plus-sized man at the beach walks around in a Speedo. He has moobs.
You know,
you put a dress on him? Is that now illegal? Is he going to be cited? I mean, I'm not saying, I don't know. I'm just saying these are all questions.
How far will it go?
How far is it going to go? And given the fascist mentality in Tallahassee, it's going to go pretty far.
It's going to. And one last thought, and we do have to move on. The extent of how far they're willing to go versus how does our house stand up to this? How does the pub stand up to this?
How does Lips stand up to this?
How does Lips stand up to this?
Which is predominantly seen straight people are in there.
Exactly. How does the drag queen stand up to this?
That's their livelihood.
The moment the state targets, I won't even use a name, X name, how do they stand up to this? This is an insidious day in Florida.
Can I make one more plea? Donate to HRC, donate to Task Force, donate to the ACLU, Equality Florida, donate to them because they are going to be our first and last line of defense on this issue.
Dress and drag and go to work dressed like that.
Yeah, okay. We are going to have a lot more to say on this, but this is breaking news happening just today. All right, let's continue. And let's queer up South Florida and Florida. We're going to talk about the same thing, but in a different way. War is declared by Governor DeSantis against Disney as the governor loses his first battle.
Disney has found a way to get around Florida's takeover of Reedy Creek. That's what the new board members picked by Governor DeSantis are saying. Disney quietly passed restrictive agreements last month that stripped the new board of many of its powers and gave maximum developmental power back to Disney. Now, this new board hired a special counsel who discovered an agreement between Disney and the old board that could last decades, possibly even longer than that. Current board members are hiring outside legal counsel to examine this agreement. The development comes after the Florida legislature, at the governor's command, overhauled Disney's government and put in their own supervisors.
Well, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has demanded an investigation into Disney after the company pulled a fast one on him amid a seemingly unending feud fueled by a battle over LGBTQ plus rights. DeSantis's demand comes after Disney made a stealthy move to prevent him from stripping the company of its long-held power over its tax district. In a letter to Florida's Chief Inspector General, Melinda Miguel, DeSantis reportedly accused Disney of attempting to usurp the authority of the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District Board, which used to be called Reedy Creek and the Reedy Creek District, and then requested a thorough review and investigation. Disney and DeSantis have been feuding since the entertainment company spoke out against the governor's anti-LGBTQ plus Don't Say Gay law, which bans discussions of sexual orientation and gender identity in lower grades and restricts them in higher grades, using language that LGBTQ plus activists say effectively bans mentioning LGBTQ plus people in the classroom. After that, DeSantis not only continuously criticized the company in public, but he also oversaw the Florida legislature's revocation of Disney's decades-old special zoning agreement to punish them. DeSantis isn't the only one seeking vengeance for Disney's move. Florida House Speaker Paul Renner said this week, also tweeting that, quote, all legislative options are now back on the table, end quote, and accused Disney of seeking to evade public accountability similar to every other business. Well, first off, I encourage everybody to read what the Reedy Creek board did before the turnover. And it's just come to light 2 days ago. And one of the interesting interpretations of what the Reedy Creek board did is they basically institutionalized Disney's ability to build in an unrestricted way, modify their public works and services on the Disney property as they want, prevent the new board that is appointed by Governor DeSantis from using any imaging of the Disney Corporation or any of their brand marks. They can never touch the brands. That was an agreement previously that they allowed Reedy Creek to do because Reedy Creek was doing it. Under the new, they couldn't. The most important and interesting way that the Disney previous Reedy Creek is getting away with this is they said you can do this until 27 years after King Charles' last heir dies.
Oh my gosh.
That's what they passed.
Oh, wow.
And so essentially that means any of King Charles' direct children, there are two, they have until they die plus 27 years.
No, it's descendant. So it's essentially in perpetuity unless the
So Harry's kid,
unless the Windsor line dies. This is
okay, and
I'm just saying it's well beyond Harry's death,
yes,
or whatever.
And broadly, there's some interpretation of that, but let's agree with what you just said. The broad interpretation is DeSantis dies before the turnover from the Disney to the new governor's board.
I read this story, like you said, 3 days ago. Oh my gosh. It made me smile. And everybody here knows I am not one to smile. I can't. But
it hurts him, literally.
But this is incredible. Somebody missed a meeting because everything everything was posted. Like you have to take out ads in the relevant area newspapers, sunshine laws, everything. Everything apparently has been papered and documented along the way, just like it was supposed to do. So yeah, this makes me incredibly happy.
Can anybody here in the governor's mansion in Tallahassee? Wah wah.
and I love that they say, they're going to have to be accountable just like every other business in the state. Okay, nobody cared about Disney accountability until they said no to the governor. Nobody gave a damn. And this will not look good for DeSantis. I'm sorry. Between the first story that we did, probably other stories we're going to do tonight, he has got enough rope to hang himself, and damn it, he's doing it. This is going to turn on. You can't say, I'm pro-business, and then say, oh yes, I also stood up and attacked the largest employer in my state and really one of the largest private employers in the country.
Yeah.
This is the rope that he's hanging himself with. It sucks for us in Florida.
I would not want to be part of that household and not being able to go to Disney.
Well,
Could you imagine? Be like, Dad, can we go to Disney? Like, no.
John's point, the new chairman, the old chairman who is now the new chairman of Disney, has come right out and said that the Governor DeSantis is anti-business, and he is going to make the plea. And frankly, I think Disney is going to be quite successful. Wait, make sure we're clear. Disney, ESPN, ABC.
Yep. Everything that comes along with Disney.
Everything that comes along with it are all going to be saying Florida, 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 but not in a good way. Yeah. And you're anti-business. And they're digging, the governor is digging this hole more and more.
Yeah, you know, Bob Iger had a phone call with stockholders a couple days ago, and one of them, I would call them an activist investor, challenged him aggressively, saying, why did you pick this fight? Why did you stand up for such a small minority of people? And he gave the absolute right answer, was that, yes, we have to look at the our broad audience base, but we also have to look out for the people that work for us, for our employees, our associates. We have to look out for them, even the small minority. And that was like, okay, that's Disney magic.
And why would Bob Iger do that? Because by all general accepted reporting, Disney is the largest LGBT employer in the world. Yeah. More queer people work for the Disney company than any other company.
Kudos to Disney, big time. And we need other organizations that are that big to put the money where their mouth is, okay? Because I totally thought that they were going to take Mickey Mouse and get the hell out of Florida, okay? And instead they're staying and they're fighting, yes. Yeah.
All right, well, we move on and we queer up South Florida gay news. Kid Rock appears to make violent anti-trans video. Vile, disgusting, dangerous. Kid Rock seems to hate trans people and really hate their being associated with a beer company. To prove it, he posted an extremely violent video on Twitter.
Grandpa's feeling a little frisky today. Let me say something to all you and be as clear and concise as possible. Fuck Bud Light and fuck Anheuser-Busch. Have a terrific day.
Rock, whose real name is Robert James Ritchie, seems angry that Anheuser-Busch, which owns Bud Light, is embracing the trans community, specifically social media influencer Dylan Mulvaney. She's partnered with Bud and Bud Light for a very clever social media campaign promoting a sports-related contest where she hugs cans of Bud Light and shows off a one-of-a-kind can with her face on it.
Hi. Impressive carrying skills, right? I got some Bud Lights for us. So, I kept hearing about this thing called March Madness, and I thought we were all just having a hectic month, but it turns out it has something to do with sports. And I'm not sure exactly which sport, but either way, it's a cause to celebrate. This month, I celebrated my day 365 of womanhood, and Bud Light sent me possibly the best gift ever, a can with my face on it. Check out my Instagram story to see how you can enjoy March Madness with Bud Light and maybe win some money too. Love ya! Cheers! Go team! Whatever team you love, I love too. Okay. Love ya. Okay, break a leg.
The contrast is clear. Her video is light, tongue-in-cheek fun. Kid Rock is the opposite. He avoids making a verbal connection, but the message was clear to his followers, who posted equally vile support in the comment section. More than 8 million people viewed the video in the first 2 days. At a time when lawmakers support legal discrimination against trans, this type of video from a rough conservative rock star becomes especially dangerous and incendiary, sending a message that could be interpreted that violence against trans people and their allies is justified. What are they scared of? Well, apparently this. This is video from Trans Day of Visibility last week at the Pride Center in Wilton Manors. There were musical performances, poetry readings, and more. Trans people contribute to society like everybody else, but while being threatened every step of the way. As for Mulvaney, she hasn't responded to Rock's video, but she has posted, quote, "If you are in a position of power to hire someone trans or non-binary, please do. We need to exist in every space. I want to see trans people doing all the brand deals," end quote. If that happens, Kid Rock's head will explode, likely faster than those cases of Bud Light. Couple fun facts for you. Bud products are prominently featured, there you go, on the menu of his Nashville restaurant. Also, while she has about 1.7 million followers on Instagram, Kid Rock has fewer than 1 million. Sounds like a case of follower envy. And you know, I love that his hate is balanced by the love and fun that Dylan showed out. And it's such an important thing. Faye, you hosted the Trans Day.
Oh my God, and I was so just touched by the ability to even be there for my trans community, you know? And you could just see how much they shine so bright. It was just a wonderful, wonderful event. And Mulvaney is her name?
Yep,
I love her.
Yep.
I just started following her as soon as I saw the story because she is just incredible. And listen, Kid Rock, you're not an effing kid. You're a grown-ass adult. Your music sucks, except when you sung with Sheryl Crow, all right? This ain't the first time that he's done this. He is constantly saying horrible things about our community, and nobody shut him down. And the awful thing that most of his followers and most of his lovers are white trash people that hate us.
But I mean, the power of the consumer is really strong as well. And this is where our community comes into play, because we need to stop following him on social media. We need to stop downloading his music. We need to stop going to his concerts. We need to stop supporting these people who make such broad statements like this that are against us.
I think they already have. He only has 1 million followers. A big kind of star back in the late 90s. Yeah. I think that he's completely irrelevant, and I think he's doing this for attention because he knows he's going to get some more followers from this video, but I don't, as vile as it is.
I'll tell you, I went back and forth on doing this story because, to your point, we're giving him attention. Exactly. But the fact is, 8 million people have viewed this. 8 million people. Now, I'm not saying all 8 million people encourage it, support it. I'm sure the vast majority don't. But my God, it's not a dog whistle. It is a loud bang, bang, bang noise saying trans is less, gay is less. And this is dangerous. This is dangerous to be out there. We need to call attention to it, and we need to shame anybody who thinks that this is okay.
And can you imagine as someone that's not mentally stable seeing this video, right? And then being in Florida where now you don't need a permit or anything to carry a gun, right? And going to get a gun and showing some action against our community. That can totally happen.
Yeah. Let's say something positive in the story. Let's say something good.
Find it, please. Ow.
It's called Anheuser-Busch. You know, when we criticize, we're coming to June. We know the 25 stories that we're going to do on Rainbow Cap. We don't like 2 tops or 2 bottoms on our hamburgers. But this is a really positive moment. This is beyond embracement. This is saying we want to do what's right. And I just cheer Bud Light. First off, Kid Rock can't do a damn thing to Bud Light. America loves Bud. America loves Bud Light. They're going to continue after this. Anheuser-Busch has made that commitment, and they can afford the knocks. The one thing that I would say that's really beautiful about this moment is the gratitude for Anheuser-Busch to do this, because it's over and above in terms of commitment. And the one thing that I would say to whatever the marketing people, the focus people at Anheuser-Busch that are doing this, by the way, I forget if it's Dutch or Belgium, but both countries are pretty LGBT in terms of their ownership of Anheuser-Busch. The one thing that is I would just say on behalf of LGBT, if I could speak for LGBTQ people, which I don't, but if I could, I would say to Anheuser-Busch, you're on the right side of history. You've just watched it side by side. You've done an excellent job of compare and contrast. Which side of this history do you want to be on? And Anheuser-Busch picked the right side, and history is going to show that. To the other side, last observation, to the other side of that, Kid Rock does what he does. You know, one of the interesting things that I was thinking of when he showed that, to make such a point of what he showed that he was going to do, I kind of recognized that gun, because I think I have seen similar kind of assault rifles like that in 33 of the schools where children have been killed this year. Good job, dude. really, really good job. Are you on the right side of history? I don't think so.
So also one point also with the Coors Light brand, I don't know if you guys have seen, but they've also introduced a new label for their beer that's on stands, sold in restaurants and bars in certain cities across the United States, and they're donating back a certain proceeds from the sale of the beer to local nonprofit charities in those cities.
So there you go.
Good on that.
Next, let's queer up drag culture. Neo-Nazi arrested for firebomb attempt of church and drag queen story hour.
Pedophiles, get the rope! Pedophiles, get the rope! Why more condition? Why more solution?
They need an invitation or something?
A member of a neo-Nazi group was arrested recently after attempting to burn down a church in Ohio that was planning to host a drag show event. Eamon D. Penny, 20, of Alliance, Ohio, has been charged in the U.S. District Court in Cleveland with 1 count of malicious use of explosive materials and 1 count of possessing a destructive device, according to a criminal complaint. The FBI claims Penny is a member of White Lives Matter, a pro-Nazi group, and the group has racist, pro-Nazi, and homophobic views. Investigators of the crime have recovered broken glass pieces from a vodka bottle and a beer bottle, each containing a cloth-type material. A burnt matchstick and a blue plastic spray bottle filled with gasoline were also found near the damaged door. Despite the attack, the Community Church of Chesterland, located in Geiga County, went ahead with hosting the Drag Queen Story Hour and brunch. If convicted, Penny may face a mandatory minimum of 5 years and up to 20 years in prison for the malicious use of explosive materials charge and up to 10 years for possessing a destructive device charge. This is a hate crime. Okay, he should be honestly charged with some kind of hate crime also. If this is the only way you can get that bastard into jail, I get it, okay? But this is definitely a hate crime. And unfortunately, I hate the fact that we're telling this story because I do believe that this is only the beginning and we're going to have more people acting out like this.
Well, this gets back to the story that I just did with Kid Rock. You know, the incendiary violence, the viral nature of his video and things like that are what we need to be scared of because they are coming for us. And I don't like to compare experiences to my Jewish brothers, sisters, and family, but I was watching a documentary recently on Kristallnacht when there was a concerted effort to go through and firebomb thousands of Jewish synagogues and businesses over a 2-night period. We live in the age of the internet, which they didn't have back then. You can have vigilante justice where they come out and just coordinate an attack from coast to coast and nothing will be able to stop them because they will somehow slip through. And the irony of all of this is that the suspect's name is Eamon D. Penny, which sounds like a drag queen's name.
Do you really feel, watching the news and the stories that we're reporting on, that America has changed on their opinions of gay people in the past 5 years because of Trump? Or is
it started in 2016. And part of that chapter closed on January 6th of 2020. And
do you feel like they've just organized themselves better, or that this sentiment has always been here?
No. This has always been an underlying component of America, whether it was Japan Japanese Americans in 1941, or the countless examples through our history. We pick on the marginalized, and there has been a percentage of Americans that have always picked on the marginalized. COVID comes along, and Asian Americans are attacked, and it's unfortunate in that it is a small minority voice, but as you just saw in that crowd, 100 people sound like 100,000 people. Mm-hmm. But this has always been American.
Next, let's queer up trans rights. New poll shows even most Republicans think GOP has gone too far over trans kids. A new poll found that a majority of Democratic, Independent, and even Republican likely voters believe that there's too much legislation aimed at reducing LGBTQ plus rights at the state level. The progressive polling firm and think tank Data for Progress conducted a survey of 1,220 participants and asked about the 429 bills presented at state legislatures attacking LGBTQ+ rights. Most of the bills are aimed at transgender youth, and 17 have already become law this year. 72% of Democratic voters agreed with the statement that there's too much legislation and politicians are playing political theater and using these bills as a wedge issue, and only 20% agreed that it's the right amount of legislation and politicians are dealing with a real danger that needs to be addressed. 65% of independent voters agreed that there is too much anti-LGBTQ+ legislation this year. The more surprising result was that 55% of Republican voters agreed that there is too much anti-LGBTQ+ legislation. Only 33% said that there is the right amount of such bills. Most Democrats, 78%, and most independents, 58%, agree that being trans is natural. Only 34% of Republicans agreed that being trans is natural, while a majority, 55%, said that it's a new phenomenon.
This is not surprising to me at all. I run in a lot of red circles and Republican groups. They don't care at all. To your wife's point, they don't care about trans people in a bad way or a good way.
They just don't.
They just don't care. It's not part of their everyday life. It's not part of their nightlife when they're going out. So they're not actively standing up against these anti-trans bills, but they hate that this is what's dominating the news because it has nothing to do with their life. What the political bodies are doing and not addressing the needs that they have. They're pissed off about that. And they're pissed off, about things that maybe Joe Biden or the Democratic Party is, but they don't want to see any more of this. They don't want to see the legislation. And I'm hoping that what we just talked about for the first 20 minutes of this show is something that's going to cause them to come out a little bit more and say, look, enough is enough. And Ron DeSantis, who wants to be a president, this cannot be a guy who's a president for the entire country.
Well, I hope that that's true, TriniDaddy. My homeowner's insurance doubled. Okay, we paid $2,300 2 years ago, and last year we paid $5,300 for our homeowner's insurance. We don't have a huge house, okay? How can some people even keep their home? So I hope that those Republicans grow some cojones, right? And if you don't know what that means, ask your local Spanish person, right? Grow some cojones and scream and go, look, you're worried about the drag queens and the trans community. How about my homeowner's insurance? How about that there's no reasonable rentals anywhere in South Florida? How about these things?
Property taxes,
And my question would be, how upset are your Republican friends about this? Are they upset that it's happening? Or are they upset that they're being tied to it? Because it's one thing to say, no, this is bad, and I'm either going to A, vote for Democrat, or I'm just going to sit this election out. It's another thing to say, I like my trans friends, or I like my gay friends, but I'm still going to vote for the fascists in Tallahassee and the fascists that control the House in Washington. Because those are two very different distinctions.
But 90% of them, don't care about politics to begin with. So they're not even, we're obviously very upset about what's going on. Most of them are not even going to know that this is happening until that it actually passes,
it doesn't affect them,
or it's on the TV.
But the question is, would it change their vote though?
But when I talked to
would it change the way that they behave? Because if you can say you don't like fascists, but if you vote for a fascist, you support fascism.
But that makes you a fascist.
They don't think about it that way, though, because when I have conversations with my Republican friends, and I have Republican friends and Trump-supporting friends, and those two are two completely different things, they just care about if that candidate checks the boxes for X, Y, and Z that they believe in, and everything else they don't care about. And I've had this conversation up to last night with a Republican friend of mine and talked to him about like the trans issues and drag and, LGBT and stuff like that. And his response was, it's a non-issue for him. But he would continue voting for Ron DeSantis because he checks the boxes for the other things that he...
Because his pocket, basically.
Yeah, I understand that. When I think about the trans community, and for those that hate on the trans community so much, I always think about the doctor's Hippocratic Oath. The trans community does not require you to like them. They don't require anything. They do require, like a doctor's Hippocratic Oath, do no harm. If you will be silent and not harm somebody, you're an ally of the trans community. It's one of the things that I think. This story is incredibly positive. And here's my spin of how positive it is. Overwhelmingly, Democrats support the trans community. What's going on has gone too far. Overwhelmingly, the independent community has said it's gone too far. 55% is a great number. It's a great number. And the reason it's a great number is what we watched yesterday in Wisconsin. It's the Republicans and the radical GOP's Achilles heel. Wisconsin is the most gerrymandered state in the country. They have figured out, with only 35% of the voting population support of Republicans, to be able to have a supermajority, just like Florida, in having a supermajority in Wisconsin, because they have gerrymandered so badly. One of the places that helped them do that was in the Supreme Court of Wisconsin. And yesterday, they lost. And they not only lost, they lost in a landslide. And now they have turned the Supreme Court to majority blue. And that Supreme Court is going to protect abortion rights, and they're going to turn over the gerrymandered rules that's going to affect Congress and the control of Congress and the control of all kinds of legislative seats in the state of Wisconsin. And that's why this 55% number is so good, because it's a reflection of what happened in Wisconsin is going to happen here. Trans being one of the examples, abortion being one of the examples, LGBT rights in general, support for drag queens, and the ridiculousness of the narrative that people like Ron DeSantis has been able to stand up on his podium and his soapbox and get attention for. But in Wisconsin, they're folding like a house of cards. Every election over the last 6 cycles has been decided between 10 and 15,000 votes on the state level. Yesterday, they lost by 15 points. They were crushed. And the reason is because a very significant number of even conservatives are tired of the bullshit that they're watching in America, and they're starting to turn on them. Wisconsin yesterday was an example of it. 55% saying trans laws on the state level have gone too far is a great number. We can work with 55% because with the Democrats and the independents and just 55%, the GOP loses, period.
Next, let's clear up LGBTQ plus civil rights. Man charged with threats on HRC with, quote, "will cut your throats." A Maryland man has been charged with threatening the Human Rights Campaign, referencing the Nashville school shooting, in which the shooter was said to be transgender. The Department of Justice filed a criminal complaint Monday against Adam Michael Natina, 34, of West Friendship, Maryland. He is accused of making the threat by phone to HRC's Washington, D.C. headquarters on the night of March 28th. A transcription of his voicemail says, quote, "You guys going to shoot up our schools now? We're waiting, and if you want a war, we'll have a war, and we'll fucking slaughter you back. We'll cut your throats," end quote. The March 27th shooting at Covenant Presbyterian School took the lives of 3 children and 3 adults. The shooter, who was killed by police, was said to have been a trans man. Right-wing politicians have been using the shooter's supposed identity to stir up hatred of trans people, although mass shooters are overwhelmingly cisgender men, mostly white. HRC spokesperson Elizabeth Beebe put the threat in the context of other attacks on LGBTQ plus Americans. She told The Advocate, quote, "The LGBTQ plus community is under attack in state houses across the country and on social media platforms. This violent, hateful rhetoric leads to stigma, and stigma leads to physical violence," end quote. Yeah, I mean, this is what, the 4th story now we're reporting. It's all the same thing that is, you know, I hope we're not becoming numb to it, but I do feel that many of these stories are not penetrating to the average American. And I think it is our voice, it's our duty to try to put it out there, because I do think that people are really concerned about this if they knew what was going on. So, yeah.
Well, let's get the facts right first. It was a trans woman who shot up the school, unfortunately, right? It wasn't a trans man. And I'm honestly surprised that more of our community hasn't gone cuckoo and done something like this, you know? And I knew initially that the Republicans especially would use that, right, as a talking point and be like, look, all LGBTQ folks are bad. Look what this trans person did, killed children in this school, you know? It was one time. I mean, not that one time, you know, it's too many. It's too much already, you know, but it's awful that I'm surprised that it's happened only a small amount of times. You know, I really do, like I said in the last story, I really do think that this is just opening up Pandora's box, and it's going to be a lot more instances this way. And it's scary. Just
surprisingly, on Fox News and conservative media, I've been watching to see if they're going to just pin all of this on trans people. There were a couple comments, but I haven't yet seen this kind of backlash.
But it takes one person, TriniDaddy. Look at this person. It takes one person. Telling the HRC, I'm going to go cut your throats? Like, wow.
I mean, and the fact is, Fox News is really irrelevant in conservative circles. And to that point, OAN and the other...
They're entertainment.
Well, no. My point is that it's the message boards. It's where the hate is communicated. Fox News doesn't have to come out and say, you know, this is a symptom of transgenderism, and we have to do it. No, the people behind the message boards, the people that are doing dark web communications, those are the ones that are spreading the hate and that are spreading the message. And you notice they want to come after the trans community, but not the guns that have been responsible for dozens and dozens and dozens of child slaughters across our country.
To your point, the day of the shooting, Marjorie Taylor Greene was quoted as tweeting in saying that it was the hormones for the trans person that caused the shooting, and we can take guns off the table. Guns don't kill people. Okay, got it.
Wow. Next, we report on our partnership with Sunshine Cathedral, the world's largest queer church right here in Fort Lauderdale. We're broadcasting from our permanent set here at Sunshine in supporting that partnership. The Happening Out television network broadcasts the largest LGBTQ plus religious live broadcast in the world every Sunday at 10:30 a.m. Eastern.
That is today's news for the LGBTQ plus community on the world's first and only LGBTQ plus evening news show.
If our community is important to you, share this news with your friends and family. Are you, like most of America, part of our very large television audience watching this live LGBTQ plus news broadcast right now on Roku, Apple TV, Android TV, and of course, Amazon Fire TV?
Queer News Tonight is the only live LGBTQ plus digital television show in the world that is out of the closet and into the headlines. We need your support. If our community is to grow, we must tell our stories and bring them to the attention of the broader world.
This is the only place in the world that tells these types of LGBTQ plus stories in motion and sound. This is the passion of Hotspots Magazine, Happening Out Television Network, and Queer News Tonight.
I'm your anchor, Al Ferguson, and on behalf of these LGBTQ plus reporters, the anchors of Queer News Tonight, including Fay What, John Hayden, Kal Gajraj, and TriniDaddy, we will see you daily at 8 p.m. And to our LGBTQ plus world, we wish you
good night.
Good night, everyone.